Hello and welcome again, everyone. This is Tom Poor with FMT Consultants. We have Tayyab Ali, our Practice Director for CRM, as our star in today's presentation. Tayyab's going to take us through some business processes and managing them using Dynamics CRM 2013.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. This is Tayyab Ali. We will be doing the business processes flow demonstration again today. This is the second webinar of the series, but if you missed the first one for any reason, you don't have to worry about that because we would do a quick overview of what we covered in the previous session and then start with today's session. For those of you who attended the previous session, just bear with me for 5 minutes. I just want to do a quick recap of what we covered. But primarily in today's session, I'm really excited about this one because based on the feedback that I got from the webinar last time around, it was maybe a lot of detail about what's part of business process flows and less focus on how you, as attendees, as audience, and as people who have Dynamics CRM and as end users could build those process flows. So this is exactly what we are going to cover in this webinar. We will be doing an end-to-end webinar, a process flow in this webinar. And it would start from the opportunity and go all the way to the invoice, receiving the invoice, check marking it as paid, and then closing that opportunity. So it is going to be really fun, I believe, and then I've put in a lot of thought on how to structure this webinar. So I believe the structure that we have now would allow you to get the maximum benefit out of this webinar, and by the end of it, you would know enough about business process flows to be able to create them. So let's start with the recap. Again, I always like to start with the why you want to learn business process flows, why they are important, what's the value proposition. And I think as I shared with you last time as well, I would just reiterate that based on my experience with CRM implementations, and they are not limited to just Dynamics CRM, I can vouch for the fact that having defined process flows on a business level, so we're not even talking about system right now, and then to map them to your system is the single most success factor for CRM implementation that stands out. Now, we can have successful CRM implementations that use CRM just as an account and contact management system. We can even have successful CRM implementations that do not have any business process flows, but the maximum value that you can get out of the system vis-a-vis your business is when you define those processes and then you align those business processes to processes within system, and then you will be able to leverage those going forward for your sales, teams ramp up, shortening the sales cycle, customer trust, improved collaboration, and stuff that you see on your screen. So I won't read through that, but I just wanted to re-emphasize that I believe it's really important to define those business processes as you set forth your CRM implementation. So the next slide. Again, just a quick recap, what's included in business processes in CRM, workflows, dialogues, actions, and business process flows. Business process flows are new with CRM 2013. So that is the reason why we focus mostly on those. But even when we did not have that, I think most of you are familiar with the fact that we did sessions on business requirement gathering, defined your processes, and tried to map them. It's just that the mapping of business processes to CRM was more like changing those business processes to fit the system. But now with this business process flows, you can actually map them as is. And I'll show you an example that we will go through the course of this webinar that will take you right from the conception where we won't even talk about the system, define a business process, and then map it to Dynamics CRM 2013. The intent of introducing these business process flows is so that all of you folks who are attending this webinar could do it themselves. The idea is that you understand your business a lot more than any outside consultant. We can come in and we can help you to define the stages and different aspects of your business process flows from the system perspective so that it's easier to map them to CRM. But at the end of the day, you understand your business better than anyone else. And the idea is to just have everyone locked up in a room, define those processes before we start the CRM implementation. This is what we covered in our last session. Again, the focus was primarily on business process flows, but I showed you an overview of all of these aspects within CRM. I won't go into the details of all of these now, but again, we would be focusing on business process flows for today. Okay. So in our last session, we focused primarily on a lead business process flow, and I showed you different stages in that business process flow and how you can actually convert that lead into an opportunity. And these are the stages that we went through. We worked on the qualify stage. Once that was qualified, we developed it, we proposed, and then we closed that opportunity. So the business process that we covered was kind of limited to just two entities, lead and opportunity. However, today what we are going to do is that we will start from an opportunity. So we have an existing customer. We open a new opportunity against that. We take that opportunity through different stages. Then we generate a quote out of that opportunity. We activate that quote. We generate an order from that quote. We fulfill that order and then create the invoice and then close that opportunity. So these are the different stages on a very high level on the business side that we would be covering. And then we will be defining the stages and we'll go through all of those details. So we won't be starting from the lead in this case. With that, I just want to jump into our business process flow. So the scheme that I have finalized for the webinar is that I'll show you a working business process flow starting from an opportunity, and then we will come back to this slide deck and then look at different aspects of defining that business process flow. I have put in a lot of thought to it, and I thought that this was the best way to actually start this, since most of you already understand some of the business process flows. So if I show it to you end to end and then come back to this stage, I thought that that would help. Okay, so I'll go to CRM now, and I'm on my opportunity form. I'm going to create a new opportunity. And just to clarify the roles that we will be playing throughout the course of this webinar. So this CRM that you see on your screen is a CRM for a company that sells Microsoft Dynamics CRM licenses and server licenses. So end user CALs, and server licenses. And obviously it could be selling it to an end client or a partner like FMT Consultants. And I am one of the sales reps. So I go in and I create a new opportunity. I just received a phone call from FMT Consultants, and they said that they would like to purchase Dynamics CRM server license as well as user license. So I will create that opportunity. So I said Dynamics CRM server and user license. And the potential customer is FMT Consultants. So you see that I have this process flow defined on the top. You see all the stages that I have defined, but you don't see them active as yet. When I say it's not active, I say that because you don't see steps against each stage. That is because the business process flow gets instantiated when you actually save the record. So I've added all the mandatory fields for this opportunity. I'm going to hit save, and as I do that, you will see that this will expand this stage, and now it shows me these steps. So what we have is that we have these stages, and against each stage, I have certain steps that are defined. So in this stage of assess needs, the sales rep is going to make sure that the need is identified. So let's say the need is must-have. Initial communication has been done, and the interest has been confirmed. So once that is done, the salesperson would go to the next stage. Now as you see, this flag has moved from the assess needs to the second stage, which is Solutionized. So I'm on the Solutionized stage, and then at this stage, the idea is to be able to add the product that they are interested in. As is evident from the topic, they want to buy Microsoft Dynamics CRM and user licenses. So we are going to go ahead and start filling it. We want to develop the proposal. They are interested. Evaluate fit, yes. Identify competitors, it's completed. So we have identified that there is probably a competitor. We put in the price list. I would put in the default one. And then once that is done, the next is to add products. So I will just go down in here. I am on the opportunity form. I will make it system calculated and add products on this opportunity. So I say existing products because I already have Dynamics CRM licenses product set up in the system. So let me just quickly go in and get that. So one server license, and let's say the user has asked for 10 user licenses. So I'll just add that in as well. And change the quantity of the end user license to 10. And this is system calculated, so it will automatically calculate the total amounts. So it's 15K. And once that is done, I am all set to mark this one as completed as well. And I will go into the next stage, which is negotiate. So negotiation means, in this case, as I defined this business process, just so that we give them the initial quote. As we give them the quote, it could be that they ask us for a discount, or we put in a discount ourselves because we have identified that there's a competitor competing for this deal. So I just go to next. And you will see as I click on the next stage, it is going to ask me to create a quote against this order. So there would be a small drop down that would appear, and it would say create a new quote. So again, as far as the end user or the sales rep, myself, I'm concerned, I'm not concerned about where all these fields are as I used to be. So if you would recall from your previous CRM implementations, you would have to worry about lead, and now I'm on an account. So let's go to the account and open that up. Now let's go to the opportunity. Now let's open up the quote entity. Here you have everything in one, on one screen, in one business process flow. So you don't have to move around and go to all those entities because the system is taking care of that for you. It's exactly how you would define it on a whiteboard when you are chalking out your business process flows. So let's say if I create a quote here, it should automatically bring in the fields from the opportunity and map those over to the quote. I will have to save it. As I said, that once you save an entity, that is where the process flow, it kicks in. So I'll just save this one as well. And you would see that it fills in these values. It also brought in the ship to address. This is because I have a workflow running at the back end. And what that workflow does is that it copies over the address for the potential customer, which in this case is FMT Consultants, to the ship to address. Now I'm going to go and bring in all the products from the opportunity. So it automatically does that. It should amount to 15K again, 10 end user licenses, and 1 Dynamics CRM license. And one thing, and it's off the topic, but I just wanted to show it quickly, is that we have this option of write-in products now in CRM 2013. So maybe you don't have a product set up in your catalog, but you can still add that in. We won't cover that in any more detail, but I just wanted to highlight that. So let's put in, throw in a 10% discount here. And once we do that, it should automatically calculate based on that discount the extended amounts. As you can see, the total amount now is 13,500. And then the next stage is I would activate this quote and send it out to the client. So as a sales rep, I activate the quote, I send it to the client, and based on back and forth, the client says, okay, the quote looks good. At that point in time, I'm going to create the order. And so the status reason for the quote is 1. It is automatically going to calculate the total value for the order. And as the order is generated, I will then fulfill the order. Once I have fulfilled the order, I will generate the invoice, and we will move along in this process. So you can see that as I'm doing different steps, we are moving along the process as well. So as I said, generate order, it automatically moved me from the quote stage to the order stage. I again have some steps as part of this stage, which is fulfill the order, which is payment term. So I want to net 30, shipment method, and I just want to highlight one thing. So as I will select the airborne shipment method, there would be a freight amount that would be added to this over here of $25. This is through business rules. So I just want to highlight some of these details like workflow copying over the shipping address, the business rule moving based on the airborne value, adding in the freight amount, because we will cover that in the later half of the webinar. So I just said the shipping method is airborne. It added the freight amount of $25. This looks good. I want to fulfill this order, so I'll do that. As I fulfill it, it will lock the order, and I won't be able to make any changes to the order form. And then I can now go to the next stage, which is to generate an invoice. It says select invoice. I would say create a new one. And it should create a new invoice. It should bring in all the products and their amounts from the order into the invoice. And based on that, so for example, if I just save this. Okay, so the date received for the February 28th. I want to bring in my products again. At the invoice level, I would like to lock the price and the products against the invoice so that nothing can be changed on it going forward. So I just click this lock button. And now, essentially, I can send out this invoice to the client. And when this invoice is paid, I just click on the invoice paid button. And when I will go to the next stage, the close stage is to close my opportunity. Now, a few things I want to highlight before we actually go into how we can build a business process that is similar to this one. One is that you can see we started from the opportunity, assess needs, and solutionize, and now at the end we are coming back to the opportunity to close the opportunity. Now, different companies handle this in different ways. So for example, if your order delivery is not as simple as the one that I have in this process, maybe you're a manufacturing company, you have bill of materials against each order, and then you fulfill them, and your order fulfillment team is totally separate from your sales team, then it could be that as you generate an order here in the fourth stage of fulfill, you send that order from your CRM to the ERP system, you fulfill that order over there, you generate an invoice, and then you send that invoice back, and based on that integration, we move forward in this process. Similarly, it could be something else. It could be just that you start from assess needs, solutionize, and once you solutionize and go to the quote, you just close that opportunity there. But in this business process flow, I am actually closing the business process flow and the opportunity at the last stage once I have actually received the invoice payment for this invoice. So it should eventually go to the next stage, and then at that point in time it would close this opportunity and it would show the actual revenue against the opportunity. It's a bit slow because this is CRM online trial organization that I'm using for this demonstration. So bear with me for a few seconds. All right. Here I am at the close stage. You can see that the status for this opportunity, and you can see on the top, the form is opportunity again. So the status is 1. The total amount is 15K. The actual close date is this. It didn't put in the discount, but if yeah, it has not put in the discount, so there's maybe something wrong there. But this, in essence, is the whole, and we call it the closed loop because we start from an opportunity and go all the way back to the opportunity. So now let's get to the fun stuff of how we can actually build these business process flows and then map it to Dynamics CRM, which I'm really excited about because I'll show you in a bit. Okay, let me just take this and move it from here to here. All right. So defining business process, defining business processes and business process flows. So the first step to define your business process flow within Dynamics CRM is to actually define that business process within your organization. What I mean by that is that unless you have a business process defined on a business level and you have a buy-in on that business process from your sales team or all the other teams that are actually involved in that business process, you can still not achieve the user adoption and you cannot make people use it. So the way you would define it usually would be that you would bring in all the stakeholders and you would say in business terms, and at this point in time you shouldn't even be thinking about the end system and as to how this would map to, say, any CRM system for that matter. And you would say, okay, in our business process we have the first stage, which is to assess the needs. Then once we have assessed and we have identified that there is a need and this potential customer is interested in buying from us, then you solutionize. And these are just the ones that I used, and you could have different terms based on the feedback that you would get from different people in your organization. Once we have solutionized, we go into the negotiate stage where we would be sending them the quote, and they would say either it's good or not good. They will share information about competitive quotes that they have. Once that process is done, you would be creating an order. Essentially, that's what we covered. You could have, as I suggested, a separate system that manages your orders. In that case, you could have additional stages here, which is send this order to our ERP system, fulfill this order in our ERP system, notify CRM about the fulfillment. Maybe you generate an invoice within your ERP system and then just notify CRM that the invoice has been paid. So you can have a different process altogether. The important thing is just to understand that as a first step of building a business process flow in CRM, you should start from this slide, which is you just identify what are your stages in your business process. Once you have identified those, the next is steps that you have against each stage. So as you saw in the example that we just went through, there were some fields on the top that we thought were important before we move to the next stage. So let me just open it up again. So if I go to assess needs, you see need identification is one of the fields that I have. So these are kind of required steps, and you can also make them required, and I'll show you in a bit as to how to do that. But the idea is that you, in each stage, you define the process steps. So in our case, establish need for the assess needs, confirm interest. In Solutionize, we say make sure that we associate products and ensure which product the prospect is interested in. Evaluate the fit, identify competitors. In the negotiate stage, we send them the quote and probably negotiate on the discount. On the fulfill, obviously you got to have their ship to address, the payment terms, the shipment method. For the invoicing, you need the billing address. And for the close, you need the close date and the actual amount. And these steps would be different based on the business process that you are defining for your organization. And they're purely business-based. So you don't need to know anything about Dynamics CRM. And I'm emphasizing that because I want to suggest that this is something that you can do on your own. Till this point in time, you maybe need to have a consultant part of your meetings just from the perspective that he could tell you that maybe you cannot fulfill orders in CRM because your orders are in ERP system, and could share the details on the technology constraints level so that you could just change it a little bit based on the feedback from the consultants, but you have to be the primary driver within your organization to define these business processes, because we're not even talking about mapping them to CRM as yet. Once you have completed this stage, so you have defined the stages and you have defined the steps, that is where we will start talking about, okay, now how to map these business processes in CRM. The first thing that needs to be done as part of that initiative is to say, how would different stages map to different entities? Now, I did say in the beginning that because you're working on business process flows like this, you don't have to worry about which entity they relate to, which is true from the end user perspective, but while you're defining it, it's obviously important to know which entity in CRM should have the assess needs and the solutionized stage, which one should have the negotiate stage, which one should have the fulfill stage. So this is where you can use Dynamics CRM expertise and try to map this to different entities. So we'll go to the next stage, which is define entities against this. The way I've defined them for these stages and these process steps is that I would map assess needs and solutionize to opportunity. Negotiate would be mapped to quote. Fulfill would be mapped to order. Invoice to invoice. And then in the end, I would just close that opportunity, so it's opportunity 1. So now let's create this business process from scratch based on what we have in front of us, and I'll show you how easy it is to now actually map it. Let me just go on to CRM again. All right. So you go to CRM. We will go into the processes section, and we will say let's do a new business process flow. And while I'm doing that, I go to processes, and I say new. So again, we will keep the semantics the same so that it's not confusing. We will say, okay, we want to build a business process flow from opportunity to invoice. Opportunity to invoice. Let's call it a demo version. The category is business process flow. Where we start from is opportunity, and I will hit OK. So this is the screen that you would get once you start building your business process flow. Now let us open our slide deck in the background because it will simplify a lot of things for us. So what did we identify here? We said that we will have these stages. We will have these steps, the ones in the green. And then in the blue, we have the entities. So let's start by adding steps, stages, and entities. So because I've started from opportunity, the entity that I already have in my business process flow, it's opportunity. The first stage that I want to have in opportunity is assess needs. So I'll go and rename this and call it assess needs. This stage category is only important because you can use this for reporting purposes. So I want to, from the reporting perspective, I have 3 opportunity stages. One is that I work on the development of opportunity. So I develop an opportunity, I assess needs, I solutionize. Then when I put forth the quote in front of the customer, I want to call that propose. And then generating an order, generating an invoice, getting paid on the invoice, I want to categorize them as closed. So I just have 3 categories. And you can have any category that you want, because they come into play when you want to say do a dashboard and you want to run all of your opportunities and see how many of them are in a particular category. So I won't put a lot of emphasis on this for this demonstration, but let's say this is in develop stage and the steps. So we said that the steps would be establish need and confirm interest. So I go in and I say give me, and these steps they map to fields in CRM. So need is one step, confirm interest. And you can see I'm only typing in and it automatically shows me the fields. Obviously, when you have your own business processes, maybe some of the fields are not in the system, so you'll have to go in and create those fields. I'm not going to touch that. I'm assuming most of you would already know how to create those fields, but if not, it's very simple. We can have a 5-minute session on that as to how you create fields against an entity. So let's keep it simple. Let's just say that there are 2 steps for this stage, which is assess needs. And then there's another stage, again in the opportunity entity. So I'm still in opportunity. The next stage is Solutionized. So I'll add a new stage. I'll call it Solutionized. So you can see how easy it is to just build this business process flow based on this slide that I have at the back, which is essentially your blueprint after your discussions with your business folks as to what you want to achieve from this business process in CRM. So I go in, I will say this is also the develop category. In the steps, I want to set products. So I'll just go in and say products. Okay. Let me just see the field. So I want to call this add product, because I don't have that field defined, so I'm just using any field in the system for this. I go in and add an additional step, which is evaluate field, evaluate fit. So I should have that, I think. It's in there. Identify competitors. I should have that in there as well. And then I'll just add in the price list one, because I know on opportunity you got to have a price list to be able to add products. So I did these 2. Now I want to add the second entity, because if I go, let me just minimize this. When we were defining this process, we said that the negotiate stage is going to be mapped to quote. Since I've started from opportunity, so I'm in the opportunity entity here, and I want to add in quotes, what I do is that I click on this plus button. As I do that, it shows me all the entities that have one-to-end relationship with opportunity, and I pick up quote. Once I do that, I've moved from opportunity to quote, and now I get to define stages and steps for the quote entity. In this case, we are calling the stage negotiate, and the step is just to make sure that if you have to give them a discount or not. So I'll just start here, negotiate. Now I'm proposing, so I'll call it opportunity propose, and then see if I have a discount field. I should have that, because it's a standard field, code discount. So I'm done with this. After this, the next entity I have is order in my process, and it maps to the fulfill stage, and these are the steps. So let me just click on plus here again. Instead of quote now, I will select order. I will call this stage fulfill. I will call it opportunity close. I'll add steps, and in the steps I need to know the ship to address and the payment terms and stuff like that. So I will go to in fact, let's do shipping method, do payment term, and let's have another step, which is to do ship to. Perfect. The next one is invoice. So I click it and I go to invoice. The stage that I have is also invoice, so it's like direct mapping. I don't have to change anything. Again, I'm in the opportunity close. I add in a step, which is just to keep it short. Let's say just bill to name. And then now, once I have generated the invoice, I want to close this loop. So I started from opportunity, generated the code, generated the order, generated invoice. Now I want to close this opportunity. So instead of adding another entity, I will go in and I will close it on opportunity. And here I would just say close, and I will record as a step the close date and the actual revenue. So actual revenue and the close date. So I put in close date is again one of the out-of-the-box fields. So here I have defined my new business process flow. I think it took us almost 10 minutes to do that. Obviously, it would take you a lot more time to define it like this as we did on the slide, because you have to talk to different stakeholders, get their feedback. But once you have done that, I just wanted to highlight how easy it is to map it to CRM. It could be that it's not straightforward like it is for our example. I wanted to keep this example really simple because we are trying to learn a lot of things here. So it's possible that we come up with a business process and we say, okay, it's not possible to map it as is to a dynamic CRM, but then you can always move the stages around and different steps in each stage around to still make it work. Now let's activate this new business process flow that we have created. So I activated that, and now one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is my default one, so that when I create a new opportunity, it will use this new process flow that we just defined. So I say okay. So let's go in and try and create a new opportunity now. So I come back in here and I say go to opportunities and do a new opportunity. Again, let's assume that we are, so Dynamic CRM is a hot product. Sorry for shamelessly advertising Dynamic CRM, but let's go ahead with that. Dynamic CRM server license and user licenses again. License. Go in, again it's FMT Consultants. Won't say anything about that. So, and I save. So now what I want to show you is that it's a new process that would instantiate as this record gets saved. So you would see that the fields on the top are the ones that we just defined. On the assess needs, we just defined the need and the confirm interest. So I say must have, just so they are not interested. I go to the next stage. And you see that it's different from the one that we initially saw when I actually took you through the whole business process flow. This is the one that we just defined. So let's get back to our slide. So we identified entities, although we have already done that. We called each one of them a stage in our business process flow. So let me just show you here. So each one is a stage. And then the steps, they became stage steps, so, and they map to different fields. So you go into each one of them, click on plus. You don't see this plus because I've activated this business process flow, but we added those fields in there. So once this is done, you'll have something that is similar to what I showed you in the beginning, in which I took you from the opportunity start all the way to the close. Few things that I want to add on top of that. So I told you while we were going through that process that when we generated a code, it automatically copied over the address information from the customer, the potential customer, to the code. Now, how did it do that? So if we go back and use the one that we were using previously, so let's create a new opportunity again. Just copy paste this so I don't take time to write it. Let's do that. New. And now I don't want to use the new one that we just created. I want to use the one that we used initially because it has all those workflows that copy stuff over, and I want to highlight that piece of the business process flows. So let me just go in and quickly switch business processes. So this is another thing that you can do. You can switch a process. So instead of using this one, I'm going to use the one that I was using previously. Yeah. So now we are back to this one. So the next stage is, once you have defined a business process flow, you would like to add some checks and balances in that business process flow. You would like to copy over some information between different fields, just to make sure that as your salespeople or any other end user who works on your business process flow, they don't have to switch between entities and they see all the data that was previously added against, say, opportunity to the code. The way you do that is you would add workflows. So for example, in this case, I would have a workflow that copies over address fields from the potential customer in opportunity to the quote. From the quote, it will copy it over to the order. From the order, it will use that as both the shipping address here and then a billing address over here. And that is all being done through the workflows. Those workflows are also defined here in the processes. So you go into the processes and you say, and I think most of you would be familiar with workflows because they were part of previous CRM versions as well. But just to show you, so this is one of the workflow which runs synchronously, and it copies over the address from the customer to the code. So if I just open it up to give you a brief glimpse of how it works, it's a very simple workflow. You create it, and it runs on the quote entity, and then in the properties you have the address field mapped from the potential customer. So once we can use these workflows and other logic to add in more details. Other things that you can do to add in additional business checks or making sure that the business process that you have, it enforces your business process. So if at a certain stage you would like your salespeople to make sure that they get certain information, or based on certain values, certain other fields should get populated, then you would add these business rules. Business rules is something new with Dynamics CRM 2013. So you can define a business rule. As I showed you, in our case, we have a business rule that based on the shipment method puts in the freight amount in the order. So if we go back to our example here and try to go through it quickly again, I should be able to show it to you. So let's say I add just one product quickly. I have to select the price list, which is default. And then I add in an existing product, call it CRM again. So just to keep it simple, let me just go ahead and go to the next stage. And it says create a code. And you would see that there would be a workflow that would run at the back end. It would copy over the address information from FMT Consultants into the ship to address. And that workflow, it runs on the save event. So as I click the save, you would see that this ship to address would get populated based on that workflow. So here it is. It just brings over the address from the FMT Consultants. And then I have my products come in from Opportunity so that I could show you how the business rules work, which is separate from the workflows. So I go in here and so once I click next, let me activate this and create an order. We're running out of time here, so I would just like to keep it short. I just want to touch upon some of the limitations before we end today's session. So I'll create an order again. We've already done this, so I'm just skipping through and covered it in a lot of detail. And then let's create this order. As this order is created, you would see when I will set the shipment method here, airborne, it sets the freight amount to 25. The way it's working is that there's a business rule. If you go to form editor, you'll be able to see that there's an icon on the top of form editor, which is a business rule ribbon button. And as I click on that, you would see that there are these business rules associated with this. And if you open up any of those, you would see that based on a shipment value, there's a certain field that is being written into the freight amount. So it's really simple to define them. It's just a matter of adding a condition. And then once you have added that condition, you can, based on that condition, add in additional fields. So let me show you. I can actually not modify this because it's a managed solution, but it's really simple to add condition, you add action, and all of these things are based on fields. So you can mark something as required, you can copy over data, add values and stuff like that. So going back to our deck, the last thing that is important is that you can add stage gating. Stage gating is very, very important because it governs when you can go from one stage to the other. So how to add stage gating? So for example, in this example, I'm saying that billing address is a stage gate. Unless you have done that, you can't go to the close stage. So if I want to do that, I will go back to my business process and invoice. So if billing address is important or bill to name is important, I just make it required. When it becomes required, it means that I cannot click on the next button in my business process flow unless the required field, and it would have an asterisk mark like this one over here. Unless that is filled, I won't be able to move to the next stage. So these are the things that I wanted to cover. So we started from just business aspects of defining your stages. We went to the steps. Then in the blue, everything that you see is mapping everything to Dynamics CRM. We brought in our entities and mapped our business stages to opportunities. The stages became process stages, and then we added stage steps, which is steps related to each stage. Once our business process flow was in place, we added some rules and regulations to that business process flow. We made it easier for our end users so that we could copy over stuff and they don't have to do a re-entry of data. We added business rules. So for example, if shipment method is airborne, the freight amount should be $25. And then we added stage gating. So with this, we have finished the definition and moving from different stages in the business process flow. What I do want to share with you are some of the limitations on these business process flows in Dynamics CRM. So firstly, not all entities have this provision of having a business process flow associated with them. There are some limitations on some of them. All custom entities, though, can have them. You have to go into the custom entity and configure it to have a business process flow, though. Once you do that, you cannot undo that change. There are maximum limit of 5 entities that you can have across a business process flow. So for example, if in my business process flow, I try to add another one here, it does not allow me to do that. It says you can have only 5 entities per business process flow. So keep that in mind. And this is one reason why I could not start this process from the lead entity. So initially I thought that I will take you from lead, convert that to opportunity, then go all the way to the invoice, but I could not do that because there is a limitation of 5 entities per business process flow. So keep that in mind when you are defining your business process flows. And there are workarounds to each one of these limitations. So for example, in this case, if I still wanted to have lead in there, I could have merged the order and invoice into one and just said that when the invoice is received, I'll just have a field in the order stage that would say invoice paid. So there are workarounds to that. Again, that is where maybe you would need some help from Dynamics CRM consultant. but that is after the fact that you have defined the business processes, you have defined different steps, and you're all set to implement them in a system. You can do closed loops. When you do closed loops, obviously that limit on entities becomes 4. There's a limit on stages. You can have maximum of 30 stages against each entity. So for example, here in Opportunity, I have 2 stages. I can have maximum of 30 stages, which is more than enough, but if it's a really complicated business process flow, then one can run into issues. There is no branching. This is important because based on feedback from different customers, they say, is it possible that if the potential customer is a small customer, then there is one process flow. But if the value of that potential customer is changed to, say, a larger customer, then there's a separate business process flow. That is not possible out of the box, but there's a workaround to that, and that can be done. However, branching is not possible. Based on certain fields, you cannot branch off. What you can do is you can have in your steps a lot of fields here and then just hide them or show them based on different values in other fields. So for example, like I showed you an example of a business rule that based on shipment method set the freight amount to 25. You can use the same logic. You'll have to be a little imaginative here because I'm running out of time to make sure that you could handle branching. Additional limitations are that maximum of 10 active business process flows against an entity is what you can have. And once an entity is enabled for a business process flow, it cannot be disabled. So with this, we come to the end of this webinar. I hope this was helpful and you will be able to work on your business process flows. If you have not done that as yet, I would encourage you to create a CRM Online instance. And let me see if I have any questions here. So give me 1 second. There are some questions. Okay. So one of the questions that I have is, when the opportunity is closed, do the quote, order, and invoice entity remain connected to that opportunity or to the contact/account? So they remain, as you saw in the business process flow, they remain connected. They are connected to both the opportunity and the contact and the account. In this case, it was a B2B process, so it was connected to the account. So the answer is that they are connected to the opportunity as well as the account. Let me see if there's any other question. Yeah, there are quite a few. Okay, let me see if I can answer as many as I can. Can Microsoft Dynamics CRM support a bonus buck or rewards point program to be used specifically for certain product? Exactly, it can. In fact, for one of our customers, they have a scoring program associated with a business process flow, and then based on certain fields which store the score, we define as to whether they should be going ahead in the next stage or not. So the answer to that question is yes, it can. The question, next one is, will this presentation be made available so I don't have to take notes? I'm sorry for the late reply if you've already taken notes, but yeah, it will be available. The recording will be available as well, and I'll send you a link so that you could also get the business process flow that I showed you, and you can put that in your CRM as you try to learn business process flows. This is another question. At the invoice level, if connected with Dynamics GP, is the invoice created out of GP or out of CRM? So this is very important. This is what I tried to cover, that if you have an ERP system, GP, or any other ERP system for that matter, that is where integration comes into play. If you want to handle your orders in GP or your invoices in GP, there can be an integration that sends that information from CRM to that ERP system, and then when the order is fulfilled or the invoice is paid, you will pass the notification back to CRM or every detail of that invoice back in case you want your sales reps to be able to answer questions related to that information. When the opportunity is closed, I already answered this question. How do you create a CRM Online instance to work on the business process flows? So CRM Online is available through a link that Microsoft provides. What I can do is that I'm making a note here. I'll ask our marketing superhero, Jake, to send out that link to all of you guys so that you could create the CRM Online instance and play around with business process flows. Another question is, can the business process flow picked automatically based on values on the opportunity? Okay, no, so that is, I want to say true, but that is not supported. So if you work with a partner, they can do some custom logic for you that based on certain fields could automatically flip the business process flow, but as per the functionality out of the box, that is not recommended and supported by Microsoft. And the last question is, okay, so it's a thank you from someone amongst you. So I welcome you all for joining in. As I said, it was the second of our series, so I hope it was helpful.
Yes, and thank you. Tyab, that was excellent. I enjoyed it, and can't wait to use some of those processes in my sales process.
Sure.
It looks great. As Tyab said, we will make this available. We'll make that come out to you all proactively. We'll also be reaching out to you if you haven't reached out to us to see if you do have any questions related to that or maybe other things regarding Microsoft Dynamics. That said, we'd like to thank you. Signing off from Carlsbad, California, Tom Poor and Tyab Ali. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, guys.